Hello everyone. Karl-Oskar is my name, Swedish lawyer and entrepreneur in the information technology business. I hope you all enjoyed the lunch. I for sure did. I think it was very good. It has been very interesting listening to the theoretical points of AI, and I actually come from a completely other side. As a lawyer and entrepreneur, I actually come across a small challenge. And that's connected to GDPR that actually brings us a much broader definition of both personal data and data source. From a legal perspective, that's not a big problem, but from a technical point of view, it creates some big challenges. Personal data is now under GDPR any information in combination with other information that theoretically makes it possible to identify an individual. So I'm sorry being a lawyer, talking about those boring stuff. What it actually means is that we're going from a situation where a social security number is considered a personal information to Karl-Oskar's wife is a personal information for my wife. And actually the Finnish champion in rally category B 1972 is actually a personal information, because it can, in combination with other information, actually be used to find an individual. Data source also changes the definition. Earlier we were looking at registers, which means previous privacy acts were actually hitting databases, registers. And now it's all collections of information that theoretically can be searched. So you all heard about the problem with documents and file shares and emails. And you're probably also aware of the fact that this also hits physical cabinet lockers where you have physical files and documents if you can actually search them in a register A, B, C, D. So we have a situation where personal data is much broader and data source is much broader, and also now includes what we call unstructured data, which is documents and emails. And we have to be aware that the unstructured data is actually 70 to 80% of all the data an organization have, and is now falling under the GDPR regulation. What this means, and what was my challenge that I entered into, is that each document and email in the organization's possession has to be reviewed according to the new definition of personal information. Okay? So start thinking about documents and emails. And also, if they do contain personal information, we have to make a legal analysis to decide if we have a legal ground to actually keep and process this personal information. Because if we don't, we have to take it away. And if we do, we actually have to document all these decisions going on in a business. Well, from a legal point of view, being a lawyer, I can tell you that, yeah, you can give me a document, we can sit down and we can go through it. The problem with this is not that it's a complex legal task of actually finding this out. The problem is mathematics. So we made some estimates. We said that, well, if a document is 2 megabytes in average, okay, well, you're working with technology, you know it's probably not, it's probably smaller. And we said that it will take you 2 minutes to review it, which means read through everything to see if it contains personal information according to the new definition. We assume that it would take you 3 minutes to make a legal decision. Well, it's a pretty fast lawyer. I don't know if you have been doing with lawyers, but they are very rarely charging you 3 minutes of work, I can tell you. And we say that it will take you 2 minutes to actually document this. And with documenting means you document the legal basis, where the document is found, what personal data you have, your purpose, how long it should be kept, and so on. And that is actually a requirement in GDPR, the records of register process activities. So you have to have this documented. Well, this goes fast. The problem is, as I said, mathematics, because this will give you 12 years of legal work per terabyte of data. And when we start looking at the situation in Sweden, we concluded that an average company has around 20 terabytes of data. And you all know your mathematics. What we're looking upon here is 240 years of legal work. So lawyers are sharing, because this will take a lot of time. But businesses are struggling. 240 years is actually the equivalent of time since the Declaration of Independence was signed in the United States. It's a very, very long time. So what we concluded is that this will simply not be possible. We have to find a solution. And the first insight we had is that GDPR is not a problem about the legal part, because that we know pretty well. As I said, I'm a lawyer. It's not really a technical question either. You're all working with technology, you know that it's well described and so on. What we concluded is that the challenge with GDPR is actually a process and a people problem, because it's actually people that have to perform work. So we took the standpoint from a people-centric position and looked upon a digital process. A digital process that would actually take the persons through this chain of activities that has to be performed in order to get to the specific goal of actually controlling personal information and your data. So the first thing we're doing is that we're actually scanning all the data sources. And of course we need to scan them, because how can we find something if we don't know what's in them? We're then applying filters in order to filter away, not filter out, but actually filter away all the documents that does not contain personal information. Why? Well, because you don't really have to read them. So reading stuff that doesn't contain personal information is totally pointless from a GDPR perspective. And already here with the filtering part, we get rid of 90% of the workload. But later on, we have to delegate what we find. So we're working with a workflow engine that actually delegates this to the person who understands the context of the information. Legal decisions are easy, as I said, but understanding the context of a specific email in your inbox and understanding why are you having this email and do we need to keep it, it's something that only you knows. And it's the same thing with all the documents. How should you understand the purpose and the context of this document if you haven't been working with it? So we need to delegate this in the workflow engine. When we have delegated it, we have to present it in a way so that the personal information from within the document content is actually highlighted. Why? Well, because it's really boring reading 47 pages of all text. It's much easier to see that, whoa, here's highlighted. Yes, it's a personal information. So this document actually contains personal information. The second challenge we had, another challenge we had, is that since we delegate things to people who understand the context, we're actually not delegating to people like me, to lawyers or legal professionals. So we have to educate them. So we have built a contextual knowledge database that is actually providing you with information for national authorities, telling you that sensitive personal data is this, so you can take a correct legal decision. And we are using documentation, metadata, and gathering the relevant metadata according to the demands in GDPR. And this metadata is, of course, a legal decision. So by doing this, we also use cognitive abilities to propose the legal ground and the legal basis for this specific document by reading its context. So by doing all this, we knew that we could cut 90 to 95% of the total workload. But we also know that, well, personal information is contextual and law is changing, so we need cognitive abilities to actually help us with this work. And we entered into discussions with a lot of technology partners, and we pretty much concluded that the traditional artificial intelligence project looks like this. You have a digital process running, or hopefully a digital process, many times it's a manual process running in your business. And you have to allocate people from other places or from that process to actually train the AI and the cognitive abilities. And at some point in time, you can use the artificial cognitive abilities to actually replace a step or a certain person or a task in the running process. Well, we found this a bit problematic because, as I said, there is a lot of work that has to be done connected to GDPR. So we assume that our customers or potential customers will not have the time to assign people to train AI. Furthermore, and more importantly, it also means that the AI is supposed to replace people in the process. In order to replace someone, you need to be at least at the same level, as we have heard earlier here, as the human. And that is not really true either. It has to be much, much better than human for us to expect a machine to take decisions and doing stuff. But the most important is that this is serial. When we have replaced it, nothing else happens. And I'm coming from compliance in the world of ISO, where we're using and working with continuous improvements. So what we wanted to achieve was an iterative process that continuously becomes better. So what we invented is something we call collaborative cognitive learning. So let me spend some time talking about this. What this means is that we have the digital process that I just explained, where people are actually reviewing documents with the personal data, the personal information highlighted. They are giving their response for the legal decision with the help of knowledge database as of cognitive abilities. This digital process is running on site at the customer. Why? Well, because we're working with GDPR. Most AI solutions are run in the cloud. You cannot send information or data to the cloud if you don't know what it contains. And that's the whole point. You don't know what it contains, which means that you can't send it to the cloud. So this digital process is actually run locally at the customer site. What we have achieved to do with our technology partners is actually to put one part of IBM Watson locally in on-prem installation. And we're using Watson NLU to create what you all know is annotation code. And we are passing this through 2 different NLUs, which means that we get anonymized annotation code from each customer installation. That annotation code is uploaded to a central AI instance. So training and deep learning of the AI is actually performed with data annotation code from everyone using the system. What this means is that we don't get the normal problems with language, for instance, because, well, I'm in Finland, I'm speaking English, some of you speak Swedish, some of you speak Finnish. In a country or a business, documents doesn't exist in one language. So we are actually training different languages and get language independent with this solution. What we then do is that we use the AI abilities that we are training. And the AI abilities here are 2. First of all, we know how personal information contextually is described in a document. The Finnish championship in rally, category B from 1972, is a contextual phrase in a piece of information. So instead of using regular expressions, we can use cognitive abilities when we are filtering our data sources and the data catalogs. And we are increasingly being better and better on doing that. What we're also training is the legal decision, which means to find the legal ground based on the contextual content of the documentation and the document, which means that I know that this is a CV, which means that a CV is probably a contract, or it can be legitimate interest. But it cannot be a legal obligation. And that's based on the context of the document. And we heard someone else saying that it doesn't really matter what it says on the front page or the file name. It's actually what the context is that decides what this is actually about. So what this iterative process actually gives us is that we start with 90 to 95% decrease of the workload. And as you understand, this will take some time anyway. If we started with 240 years, even if we reach 99%, we will still have 2 years of work in front of us. But we will continuously get increased performance from the AI that supports people working in the digital process, and where people is actually training collectively and collaboratively, training the same instance of artificial intelligence. So this is AI applied, and what this gives us is, of course, huge amounts of high-quality training data, which means that our abilities are trained very, very fast. And you all know that working with AI, it's just a question of getting high-quality training data. We actually get annotated code directly from our customers' instances with the correct legal decision directly coded within the context. So this is why we, together with some other companies here, are talking about Aigine makes sense. Because we do make sense by working in the digital process, by training the cognitive abilities. But furthermore, and our long-term value to the market is, of course, that if we succeed, which we are, with separating data from personal information, we open up a new future for our customers. Because GDPR does not regulate data whatsoever. It regulates personal information within your data. And as long as you're not successful in separating those two, you will start develop bad habits. And bad habits is the key delete on your keyboard. And that what is many customers and organizations are doing today is that they are deleting stuff instead of saving them for a data-driven future. You have to save it to be able to be data-driven. So we are part of the PEDAB ecosystem, and they have helped us finding the relevant partners and make all this come together. I'm standing over there, so if you want to talk more to me, don't hesitate to come by and we can have a small chat. Thank you.